The galaxy is old, its empires are powerful, and its wars are endless. Humanity stands. These are the Empyrean Chronicles.
The Bad Idea, a story of the Empyrean Chronicles, featuring Commander Jack Morrison. Part 1. The Separation. The recon run had been clean for the first 4 hours. This was, in Morrison's experience, the most dangerous kind of clean, the kind that accumulated quietly and then spent itself all at once in a way that left no time for adjustment. 4 hours of empty space and routine sensor sweeps, and the specific boredom of deep recon that experienced pilots managed and inexperienced pilots mistook for safety, and then the Vrall interdiction wing came out of the debris shadow of Grekkath 7-9er like they had been there the whole time, which they had. 12 ships, fast intercept class, already in attack formation. Morrison had 0.4 seconds between acquisition and the first volley. He used them. Scatter, he said on the wing frequency, and did not wait to see if anyone acknowledged, because acknowledgement took time, and time was the one resource that had just become critically scarce. The Bad Idea rolled hard to port and dropped thrust simultaneously, a maneuver that the flight manual did not include, because the flight manual had been written by people who believed that maneuvers should be reproducible under standard conditions. And this maneuver was only reproducible if you had spent 3 years learning exactly how far you could push a modified Scout-class interceptor before it stopped doing what you asked and started doing what physics demanded instead. The first volley passed through the space where he had been 0.3 seconds earlier, close enough that the shield impact sensors registered the energy wash. "Talk to me," he said. Lieutenant Pell's voice came back first, tight and controlled the way it got when things were moving fast. "2 on me. I am engaged." "Vaskin," Morrison said. "Static." Then, "Hit. Starboard engine. I'm still flying." "Orin?" "Nothing." "Orin?" "Still nothing." Morrison rolled the Bad Idea through a hard inversion and got eyes on the engagement geometry in the 2 seconds the inversion bought him before he had to commit to the next move. He saw Pell's bird corkscrewing through a gap between 2 Vrall interceptors, shedding one of them on the turn. He saw Vaskin's ship trailing drive plasma from the starboard housing, losing speed, still fighting. He saw 2 Vrall ships in a pursuit pattern on a vector that did not have Orin's transponder at the end of it. He did not see Orin. 4 seconds had passed since the first volley. "All wings break and run," Morrison said. "Get to the relay beacon. I will cover." "Morrison," Pell started. "Go," Morrison said, and the way he said it was not a suggestion. He brought the Bad Idea around hard and put himself between the pursuit formation and Vaskin's damaged ship, which was the geometrically correct position for covering a wounded wingmate, and also the position that put him directly in front of 6 Vrall interceptors that had just identified him as the new priority target. He fired, not carefully, not with the deliberate economy of someone managing a limited payload over an extended engagement. He fired the way you fired when the math was simple, and the math was this. Vaskin needed 45 seconds to reach jump speed, and Morrison needed to make 6 Vrall interceptors spend 45 seconds dealing with him instead of with Vaskin. He gave them something to deal with. The Bad Idea went through the Vrall formation the way a stone went through glass, not cleanly, not without damage, but completely, and in a direction that the formation had not anticipated, because no pilot operating within standard parameters would have chosen that vector through that geometry at that speed. Morrison was not operating within standard parameters. He had never operated within standard parameters. He came through the far side of the formation with his shields at 71%, 40% of his primary payload spent, 1 targeting sensor offline, and the particular sharp focus that came to him in the moments when everything was moving too fast for anything except instinct, and the 15 years of accumulated understanding of how a modified Scout-class interceptor moved through space when you asked it to do things it was not supposed to be able to do. Behind him, the formation scrambled to reorient. Ahead of him, Vaskin's transponder blinked once, twice, and then the signature changed to the distinctive pulse of a ship in jump transit. Gone. Good. "Pell," Morrison said. "Clear," Pell said, breathing hard. "I am at jump range. Morrison, get out." Morrison looked at his tactical display. The 6 ships he had just gone through were reorienting. The other 6, the ones that had been covering the far approach angle, were now moving to close off his jump vectors. 12 ships total, and they were no longer in the loose interdiction pattern of a formation that had just sprung an ambush. They were in the tight coordinated geometry of a formation that had a specific target and knew where it was going. His jump vectors were closing, all of them. He had approximately 90 seconds before they were all gone. "Pell, go," he said. "I will meet you at the beacon." A pause. "Morrison," I said, "go, Pell." The pause was shorter this time. Pell knew the tone. Everyone in the wing knew the tone. Pell's transponder shifted to jump signature and disappeared. Morrison looked at his display. 90 seconds had become 60. He ran the geometry. The jump vectors to the beacon were gone. The secondary vectors were going. The tertiary vectors, the ones that required a transit path through the outer debris field of Grekkath 7-9er before reaching jump-capable space, were still technically open but closing fast. He went for the tertiary. He did not make it. Not because he was not fast enough. Because the Vrall formation commander was good and good commanders did not chase, they anticipated, and the debris field approach had been anticipated and covered by 4 ships he had not seen holding position in the field shadow. He came out of his burn and found them waiting. 60 seconds later, the box was closed. 12 ships had become 37, then 41, then 43 as the formation consolidated around him and the debris field closed off the remaining angles. Morrison sat in the center of the box and looked at his display. He thought, 43. He thought, that is more than I usually get. He began doing math. Part 2. The Conversation. The Vrall commander's name was Grekkath, and he opened the channel with the particular quality of someone who had done this before and considered it a professional courtesy rather than a formality. "You are surrounded," he said. "Yeah," Morrison said. "I noticed. You are pretty good at this." The pincer from the debris field shadow was clean. I did not see the 4 holding position until I was already committed to the vector. A pause. Grekkath said, "You understand your situation." Morrison said, "I understand the geometry. 43 ships, 1 fighter, debris field on 2 sides, your formation on the other 2. He paused. "Can I ask you something?" Grekkath said, "Yes." Morrison said, "The 4 ships in the field shadow, that was your idea specifically or standard doctrine?" Another pause. In Vrall military culture, acknowledging an enemy's tactical competence was a specific and meaningful act, and Grekkath recognized that the question was doing exactly that. He said, "Standard doctrine adapted to the terrain. The field shadow was my read." Morrison said, "That is what I thought. The positioning was too precise to be by the book. Someone had looked at the ground." Grekkath said, "You are giving me a compliment." Morrison said, "I am giving you an accurate assessment. There is a difference." He was also, while saying this, looking at the debris field boundary on his tactical display with the specific attention of someone who was having 2 conversations simultaneously. One with the Vrall commander and one with the geometry of his situation. The boundary density, the clearance distance, the weight of the debris at the field edge versus the field interior. He needed data he did not have. He said, "The field boundary on the port side. Your ships are sitting at standard clearance distance?" Grekkath said, "Why do you ask?" Morrison said, "Curiosity. I have never been boxed against this particular field before. Humor me." A pause. Kael'drath said, "Standard clearance. Approximately 200 meters from the hazard boundary." Morrison said, "And the boundary density. Consistent or variable?" Kael'drath said, "Variable. Lower density at the edge. The heavier material migrates inward." Morrison said, "Right. So the boundary is navigable at speed for the right ship." Kael'drath said, "For most ships, the risk would be significant." Morrison said, "For most ships." He closed the data gap he had needed to close. The conversation had taken 90 seconds. He had what he needed. He said, "Kael'drath, I am not going to power down. I want you to know that before we go any further." Kael'drath said, "Then the outcome does not change." Morrison said, "The outcome is not determined yet." He paused. "But I want to tell you something before I do what I am about to do. You built a good box." The field shadow read was the best piece of tactical positioning I have seen in this sector. That is on the record. A silence. Then Kael'drath said, "What are you about to do?" Morrison said, "Something that is going to look like it came out of nowhere." It did not. It came out of this conversation. He closed the channel. He armed the 2 proximity mines on his ventral hardpoints. He pulled up the power management interface, the modified one, the one the engineering officer had approved, with the expression of someone who could not find the flaw in something they were certain had a flaw. He set the burst vector. He thought, 4 degrees makes the difference between the clear path and the path that is only mostly clear. He hit the burst. Part 3. The debris field. The bad idea went from idle to 240% of rated maximum in 0.3 seconds, and the mines dropped from the ventral hardpoints into the center of the box as he accelerated away. And he did not look back, because looking back was a use of attention he did not have available right now. He had 1.8 seconds before the field boundary. He used 0.4 of them to refine the entry angle by 4 degrees. He entered the field. The next 4 seconds were the most concentrated flying of his life, which was a meaningful statement given the 15 years that preceded them. At this speed, the lower density boundary material was not small. Debris the size of his helmet hit the shields at velocities the impact system registered as critical. Debris larger than that required active avoidance. Micro-corrections executed faster than the manual specified the maneuvering thrusters could execute. The manual had been written for a stock ship. He made 11 corrections in 4 seconds. The burst ended. He was inside the field, decelerating, working with the deceleration rather than against it because fighting it would have sent him into a tumble, and a tumble in a debris field at this speed was a way of turning one problem into many smaller problems distributed across a wide area. What followed was 12 minutes of navigation that required everything he had. The field interior was dense. The paths through it were real but not obvious and not forgiving, and the bad idea was a modified Scout-class interceptor designed for open space engagement, not for threading through 8 months of accumulated ore processing debris at speeds that made every correction a commitment. He found the paths. He threaded them. He came out the other side with 61% shields, 73% payload, full engine capability, and the port thruster making a tick it had not been making before, which he logged for later and did not think about now. He had come through the field. He checked the display. The Vrall formation was on the other side of the field, but not all of it. Part 4. The chase. 8 ships had gone around. Kael'drath had anticipated the exit vector and positioned 8 of his fastest interceptors to cover it, which was, Morrison noted with genuine appreciation, exactly what he would have done. He had 0.6 seconds between clearing the field boundary and the first targeting solution finding him. He used them, full thrust, hard burn to starboard. The bad idea accelerated away from the field exit at a vector that was not the logical exit vector, not the one that pointed toward UEF space and the relay beacon in safety, but the one that pointed deeper into the sector, which was the direction nobody ran, because running deeper into contested space was not running. It was relocating your problem. Morrison was not running. He was thinking. The 8 Vrall ships came after him. He let them. Not because he could not go faster, he could go faster. He let them stay close because close was where he needed them, close enough that they were committed to the pursuit, close enough that breaking off would cost them position they could not easily recover, close enough that they were in the geometry he was building, rather than the one they preferred. He had 600 kilometers of open space ahead of him before the next debris concentration, which the sector charts identified as Grekkath Processing Remnant 4, smaller than 7-9er and less dense, but present. He needed 4 minutes at current speed to reach it. He had 8 ships behind him that were going to make those 4 minutes expensive. The first volley came in at 40 seconds out. He rolled the bad idea through the evasive pattern, the random variance he used when he wanted to make targeting solutions worthless, and felt 2 hits register on the shield system, glancing manageable, 61% becoming 58. He fired back. Not randomly, specifically. He had 73% payload, and he was not going to spend it on the geometry behind him. He fired at the lead ship, the fastest of the 8, the one that was setting the pace of the pursuit. One shot, precisely placed, at the port engine housing, where a direct hit at this angle would not destroy the ship, but would reduce its speed by enough to change the formation's dynamics. The shot connected. The lead ship dropped speed. The formation adjusted. The adjustment took 11 seconds and created a gap in the pursuit pattern that lasted 4 of those 11 seconds, and which Morrison used to change his heading by 6 degrees, a small correction that shifted his approach angle to Grekkath Four in a way that was not obvious from behind, but that would matter when he got there. The pursuit reformed. 7 ships now at full speed, 1 at reduced, the formation tighter and more cautious, the Vrall commander on that wing understanding that the target was not panicking and adjusting his approach accordingly. Good, Morrison thought. Learn. 3 minutes and 20 seconds to Grekkath Four. The second volley came at the 90-second mark. More coordinated this time, 3 ships firing simultaneously at a spread pattern designed to cover his most likely evasive vectors. He went through the pattern rather than around it because through was the direction they had not covered, the gap between the spread's left edge and the debris shadow of a piece of Grekkath 7-9er wreckage that he had spotted 30 seconds ago and had been waiting to use. 1 hit. Shields at 53%. He fired twice on the way through. Both shots at the same ship, the one on the formation's right flank that had the clearest shot on him and was therefore the most dangerous. First shot to the shields. Second shot to the drive housing, while the shields were redistributing power to compensate. The ship on the right flank dropped out of formation. 6 ships. Morrison checked his heading. 2 minutes to Grekkath Four. The pursuit had tightened further. The Vrall formation commander had stopped trying to spread the engagement and had consolidated into a tighter pack, accepting that the target was going to find the gaps in a spread formation and deciding that a consolidated pursuit was harder to pick apart even if it offered a cleaner target. It was the correct adjustment. It was also, Morrison thought, exactly what he needed. He hit the boundary of Grekkath Four at full speed and went in without slowing down, which was not the approach the sector charts recommended for a debris field rated as moderate density, but the sector chart's recommendations were calibrated for ships that were not modified Scout-class interceptors with pilots who had just navigated Grekkath 7-9er from the inside. He went through Grekkath Four in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. It took the Vrall pursuit formation 6 minutes and 40 seconds. The 2 minutes and 10 seconds of separation that created was not enough to reach jump range. It was enough to set the next piece. He came out of Grekkath Four and turned back toward 7-9er, back toward the box, back toward Kale Drath and the 35 ships that had not gone around the field, and he opened the wing frequency and said quietly, the code that his wing used for a specific situation that they had drilled for and never used in a live engagement. 1 word. He said, funnel. He did not wait for a response. Either they had been tracking his transponder and were in position, or they were not, and either way, he was committed now. He ran the numbers one more time. Then he turned to face the 6 ships coming out of Grekkath Four behind him, and he flew straight at them. Part 5. The Trap. The 6 Vrall ships coming out of Grekkath Four were not expecting him to turn around. Nobody turned around. Turning around meant flying back toward the pursuit, which was the direction you had just spent considerable effort and fuel getting away from, which was tactically equivalent to a retreating army running back toward the enemy and hoping for different results. It was not tactically equivalent. It was tactically unprecedented, which was a different thing, and the 2 seconds of hesitation that the Vrall formation demonstrated when Morrison's ship inverted and accelerated back toward them were the most valuable 2 seconds of the engagement. He used them. Full payload on the lead ship. Not 1 shot. 4 shots, rapid sequential, targeting the same point from 4 slightly different angles as the bad idea closed the distance. The kind of firing solution that required proximity, Morrison should not have been willing to generate, but that he was generating because the math had a specific requirement, and the requirement was this ship off the board now. The lead ship went off the board. 5 remaining. The formation broke to avoid the collision course, which was the correct response, and Morrison went through the break at full speed, rolling through the gap between the 2nd and 3rd ships with clearance that the maintenance crew would have found distressing, firing left and right as he passed, not aimed shots, suppression shots, keeping the formation reactive rather than proactive for the 2 seconds he needed to clear their arc. He cleared their arc. He checked behind him. 5 ships reformed, coming fast. Ahead of him, Grekkath 7-9er filled the display, and beyond it, the box where Drath sat with 35 ships that had not gone anywhere. He was flying back into the box. This was, objectively, a situation that required explanation, which he did not have time to provide, so instead he checked the wing frequency for the response to funnel and heard, through the carrier static of contested space, Lieutenant Pell's voice say 3 words. 2 minutes out. Morrison exhaled. He checked the board. He had 5 ships behind him, closing. He had 35 ships ahead of him, waiting. He had 2 minutes before his wing arrived from the jump point at Pell's vector, which he had calculated when he transmitted the code, and which put them coming in from the precise angle that the box created a blind spot on, the angle that Drath's formation was not covering because Drath had no reason to cover it because nothing was supposed to be coming from that direction. He needed to keep the 5 ships behind him in the chase for 2 minutes. He needed to pull them close enough to the box that when the wing arrived, the angle caught all of them. He needed to not get killed in the process, which was the constraint that made the rest of it interesting. He went back into the field shadow of 7-9er. Not into the field. Along the shadow edge, the boundary where the debris was sparse enough to navigate at speed, but present enough to make targeting solutions difficult. A ribbon of navigable space that the Vrall formation behind him could follow, but could not cross laterally without entering the field proper. It funneled them. He had thought about this when he looked at the sector charts 40 minutes ago, in the seconds between recognizing the box was closing and committing to the burst maneuver. The shadow edge was a corridor. A corridor had 2 ends. He had come out of one end. The other end opened into the space above the box's northern face, which was the blind spot angle, which was where Pell was coming from. He ran the shadow edge at full speed with 5 Vrall ships behind him and 35 ahead, and the bad idea making sounds it had not made before the debris fields and the shields at 44%, and the payload at 31%, and the port thruster ticking on every rotation. 90 seconds. The 5 ships behind him were committed. They had been committed since he turned around. They had chased him through Grekkath Four and back, and they were close enough now that breaking off would put them in the box's crossfire, whether they wanted to be there or not. Their geometry had become his geometry. 60 seconds. Drath's formation ahead had resolved his position and was beginning to reorient, the outer ships shifting to cover the shadow edge approach. Drath was good. He was reading the move. He was going to have ships in the right position in approximately 90 seconds. Morrison needed 30 seconds. He came out of the shadow edge into the open space above the box's northern face at full speed and pulled the bad idea into the hardest turn the frame would support, a 180 that pressed him past the edge of what the inertial compensators could fully manage and briefly made thinking difficult, and came out of the turn pointing back the way he had come, pointing at the 5 ships coming out of the shadow edge behind him, pointing past them at the jump point behind them, where space was folding and Pell's wing was coming through. He said on the open frequency, the one Grekkath was on, new variables in the equation. Then he got out of the way. Pell came through with 9 ships, which was all of the wing that was left after the initial engagement, and they came through hot and tight, and in the attack formation they used when they were coming into a known engagement rather than a developing one, and they hit the gap between the 5 pursuit ships and the northern face of Grekkath's formation at the angle that the funnel had set up, the angle that Grekkath had not had 90 seconds to cover. The 5 pursuit ships had nowhere to be that was not in someone's firing arc. They lasted 40 seconds. The northern face of Grekkath's formation took the engagement that followed with the professional discipline of ships whose commander understood the new geometry immediately and made the correct call, which was the call Grekkath made in the 12 seconds after Pell's wing came through the jump point. On the open frequency, Grekkath said one word: withdraw. The formation peeled, clean and fast, the way a disciplined formation peeled when the order came before panic rather than after, the ships braking on coordinated vectors that took them out of the engagement arc and into open space in a pattern that the UEF wing could not pursue without splitting their own formation and creating vulnerabilities that a disciplined Vrall rearguard would exploit. Grekkath knew how to leave. Morrison watched them go. He sat in the cockpit of the bad idea and watched 30-something Vrall ships execute a withdrawal that was, he had to admit, as clean as the box had been. And he thought about the geometry of it, the way the new variables had changed the equation, the way Grekkath had read the change and responded to it in 12 seconds. Good, Commander, he thought again. Pell's voice came over the wing frequency. Morrison, you look terrible. Morrison looked at his shield display, 44%, then at the hull integrity report, which had 3 amber indicators, then at the payload, 31%, then at the port thruster diagnostic, which was now recommending immediate service in language that the diagnostic system reserved for situations it felt strongly about. I have had worse days, he said. Name one, Pell said. Morrison thought about it. I will get back to you, he said. He set a course for the carrier and let the bad idea find its speed, which was less than it should have been and more than the diagnostic system thought was advisable. And he pulled up the mission log and started writing, because the debrief was going to require documentation, and the documentation was going to require him to explain, in the sequential language of official records, the series of decisions that had led to a solo scout-class interceptor leading a 43-ship Vrall interdiction force into a trap it had not known it was entering. He wrote for a while. He got to the part about the conversation with Grekkath and the questions about the debris field boundary, and he looked at what he had written and added a line. He wrote, "He told me they do not drink. We'll need to find something else." He closed the log. The bad idea flew home through the dark, ticking on the port thruster, shields at 44%, a little battered, a little slower than it had left. Intact, much like its pilot. Epilogue. When he brought the bad idea into the landing bay of the carrier Ardent Cross, the deck crew was waiting. Not because they had been told to wait, because word moved fast on carriers through the informal channels that existed in parallel to the official ones, and the wing frequency had not been encrypted for the last 20 minutes, and people had been listening. He powered down, and the cockpit opened, and he climbed out and dropped to the deck, and the deck crew looked at the bad idea, at the hull scoring and the amber indicators on the external status panel, and the port thruster housing that had a crack in it that had not been there this morning, and nobody said anything for a moment. Pell was there. He looked at Morrison, then at the ship, then at Morrison again. 43, Pell said. 43, Morrison agreed. Pell looked at the ship one more time. He said, "You owe me a debrief explanation for why you flew back into the box." Morrison said, "It was the only move." Pell said, "That is not an explanation." Morrison said, "It will make more sense in writing." He picked up his kit bag and walked toward the debrief room, and the deck crew watched him go and then looked at the bad idea and began the work of figuring out what it was going to take to put it back together, which was considerable, and which they did without complaint, because they had been doing this for 3 years and had learned that the bad idea always came back, and that was worth whatever it cost to keep it flying. It was worth it every time.
If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of humanity rising among the stars, please like, comment, and subscribe. New stories are released regularly here on Empyrean Chronicles.